This is the first video in Next.js 14 series that I'm going to be making. And my goal with this series is to teach you every important concepts and ideas that we have in the Next.js so that you can use those concepts and ideas to build very robust and performant applications using Next.js. In this video, I'm going to be talking about routing in Next.js. Before we get started, there's a quick disclaimer that I want to put. First thing is that in this video and upcoming videos, I'm going to be using app router. So if you do not know, there are essentially two types of router available in Next.js. We have pages router and then we have app router. So in the recent version of Next.js, they have introduced app router, and app router is now the recommended way of building your Next.js applications. So that is why I'm going to be focusing on that in this video and upcoming videos. So let's try to understand routing in Next.js. So what I've done is I've essentially created a new Next.js 14 project, right? Next.js has something called file-based routing system. So what that means is that you essentially create files and folders, and then these files and folders map to a particular route segment. So consider this example. For example, let's say if I now try to access this about page, you will see that I am getting a 404 page because we have not created this about page. And the way you create this about page is by going to your app directory. Inside of this app directory, you are going to create a new folder, and we are going to call this about, right? Inside of this folder, I'm going to be creating a special file called page.tsx. The reason I'm calling this a special file because it has to be named page.tsx or JSX depending upon TypeScript or JavaScript you are using. And then this file is going to return some sort of JSX. So this is what it takes to create a route and make it publicly accessible. That means now if I go to about page, I will see the content of the about page, right? Okay. What if you want to create a nested route, for example, about me or something? So right now it is going to 404 page. So let's see how we can create a nested route. It is also pretty simple. Inside of this about folder, we are going to create a new folder called me. And then inside of this folder again, we are going to create a new file called page.tsx. Again, this file is going to be returning some sort of JSX, right? And now if I just show you that we are seeing the content of the me page. Okay. Now, if you have developed some applications in the past, you must have seen something like this. For example, let's say that you have users profile page. For example, you could have a page like users, and then here you can pass user ID, and based on this user ID, we can see the user profile of different users, right? Okay. Now the thing is that this part is going to be dynamic, right? There is no way for us to know initially beforehand that what its value is going to be. So how do we create dynamic routes in Next.js? Well, this is also pretty much very simple stuff. So consider this, that I'm going to be creating dynamic routes for this. That means whatever I type here, a page should be loaded here. And then based on this value, this last segment, we are going to show a different kind of content in this page, right? So that means in order to create a dynamic route, what I can do, I can rename this me folder and use a pair of square brackets, and then I'll place a variable name here. For example, let's say type. Now obviously this variable name could be anything, right? The thing is that now you can access this variable inside of this page.tsx file, and this variable is going to be holding the value of that dynamic segment. So we'll be getting params, and then this params will have type. So we'll basically use this type to show some content, right? So that means if I just come over here, so right now what happens is whatever I pass over here, you will see that will be reflected over here. And now you can understand this, like based on this last dynamic segment, based on this, you can get this value and show a different kind of UI, different kind of user data, or whatever you want to show. Okay. So at this point, we have basically understood few important things. How can we create simple routes, and then how we can create nested routes. And we have also learned about how can we create dynamic routes, right? And we also learned about this page.tsx file. this is a special file which makes your route publicly accessible, right? Now, this is not the only file that is special in Next.js. There are just a lot of files that are special. For example, if I just show you, as you can see, these are all of the files that we have that would be considered as special file, and they all serve a different purpose. So let's talk about these files one by one. So first file that we are going to be talking about is this layout file. This layout file contains the shared UI for the current segment and all of its subchildren. So consider this example for now. We are using some of the terminology here. For example, we are saying segment and its children, right? So all of these parts that are separated with a forward slash basically represents a segment. And then these segment maps to a different directory inside of the app router, right? So for example, building your application, this would be a different segment. And the children of this building your application segment is going to be routing, right? And similarly, app is a different segment, and building your application and routing are its children. Okay. So when it comes to layout file contains the shared UI for the current segment and its children. So if we have a look at the application, this is the root layout that we have. And since this file is present in the root level, whatever you include in this file is going to be present in all of the children's, all of the pages across your web application. But what if you want to have a different kind of layout for your about pages? Let's say about pages and all of its children, you want a different kind of layout. How would you do that? Well, you could do something like this. First of all, I'm going to be deleting this type folder. So right now we have only this about route, right? And if I just go to about page, you'll see that this is the about page, right? So let's see that for about page and all of its subchildren, we want to have something extra in the layout. So what I can do, I can create a new file, layout.tsx at this level. And this is again going to be a function about layout. And this function is going to be accepting this children. And then we are going to be returning this children over here, right? So now any page that is part of this about segment will inherit this layout, right? So what we have done is basically this contains this about layout, and then in the bottom of this we are showing the children, right? So that means if I just come here, go to about page, you will see that this is the about layout and this is the about page, the content of the about page. But now notice what happens when I go to the home page. When I go to home page, we are not seeing that about layout over here because at this level about layout does not exist. So this layout will be shared with this about segment and any of the children. For example, any of the sub pages that we create. For example, if I just create another page called me and I say page.tsx and then I export this, we have only added a div called me page. And then now if I just try to go to about me, you will notice that we are having this text also about layout, which is coming from the about layout, right? Okay, so this was about the layout file. Now let's talk about our next file, which is loading file. Okay, so as the name suggests, loading can be used to show a loading state or loading UI. For example, let's say that you have created this about page. Again, I'm going to be deleting this me folder because I'm going to be keeping things simple so that you can understand things in a very easy and simple manner, right? Let's also delete this layout file. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'll create a new file called loading.tsx, and this is just going to be a loader, right? And I can name this loading about page. Okay, now this loading page should appear whenever the about page is taking longer than expected to load, right? So if I just go to about page, you will see that since the page load is very instantaneous, we are not seeing that loading state. So how about we do something like this? I can convert this function to a async function, and then I can await a new promise that is going to get itself resolved after 5 seconds. So this is me simulating the real world experience. For example, that this about page is going to take 5 seconds of time. Obviously 5 seconds is a lot of time, but that is not the point. At least this way you'll be able to see the loading state, right? So now if I just come here and refresh this page, you'll see that this is the loader that we are seeing, loading about page. And after about 5 seconds, we'll see the content of the about page, right? So this is the purpose of the loading file. Okay, now let's move on to our other file, which is going to be a file called error. So error.tsx, again, as the name suggests, can be used to show an error state for your that component or page, right? First thing that you need to know about error file is that it can only be a client component, right? So what this means is that whenever we get some sort of error from this page or from any of its children, we will show this UI, right? So let me show you this example. So right now what I can do, probably after about 5 seconds or something, I can throw this error, something went wrong. And now I can come here and I can refresh this page. And let's see what happens now. As you can see, after 5 seconds, we basically threw that error, and now we are getting that UI, something went wrong, that is coming from this error.tsx file that we have created, right? Now, one of the things that you need to know about error file is that if you create a layout, for example, let's say you have a layout at this about at this level, and export default function about layout, and we are using children over here. And so one thing that you need to know about this error file is that it cannot capture the error from this current layout, for example. So since these are in the same level, whatever error you throw or you get from this layout.tsx file will not be captured by this error.tsx file because they are on the same level. So in order to capture the error from this layout.tsx file, what you can do, you need to place an error file inside of its parent. And if you look, the parent of this about folder is this app directory. That means you need to place an error file in the parent, and this way you can get the error. And I can say something went wrong, and in the, so I can say coming from root error tsx file. Okay, so let's see this in action. So what I can do, first of all, if I throw an error from this, something went wrong coming from about layout. So if I throw an error, you will see that this is what we are getting. Something went wrong coming from root error.tsx file, right? So we are not getting this file. We are getting the file that we have created in the root because we are throwing an error from the layout file. Okay. Okay. Here's the interesting thing. If the error file cannot capture the error thrown by the layout file that is present on the same level, how would you capture the error that is thrown by the layout file that is present in the root? I mean, because you cannot go outside of this app directory, you cannot create a file error.js at this level. You have to keep all of your files inside of this app folder only. So what happens if this layout.tsx file throws an error? How would you capture that error? So in order to capture the error from a root layout of your application, which basically wraps your entire application, there is this another special file which is called global error.tsx. That means inside of this app folder, I can create a file called global error.tsx, right? Again, this is going to be a client component, and this is the global error. Something went wrong coming from global error.tsx file. This is important. So that means that whenever you throw an error from the global layout file, this component will be rendered. Now, two important things at this point about global error file. First thing is that since this replaces the entire document, so you'll have to include the full HTML over here. You cannot just use a div, right? And in the development mode, this global error file will not appear because it only works in production, right? Okay, so let me delete all of the unnecessary things so that you can clearly understand what is going on. I will delete these about folder, then this error.tsx file. So at this point, we just have this global error.tsx file, and then we have this layout.tsx file. And inside of this root layout, we are throwing this new error. Something went wrong coming from the root layout, right? And I can get rid of this file. Okay. So now we need to see if we are getting this global error.tsx component or not. So right now, since we are in the development mode, Next.js is actually showing its error overlay, that there is an error. You need to fix this, right? So let me do some sort of hacking to actually show you this. So how about we do something like this, that if we just make the build of this project. Okay, since we are throwing the error, we cannot make a build because it is trying to pre-render this. So let's tell Next.js that you should not pre-render this. Again, this is just for the demonstration purpose. You do not have to do this, right? So what I'll do is export const dynamic, and I'll set its value to force dynamic. So with this, what I'm saying is that do not try to pre-render this file. Whenever the request comes, at that time, just execute your code. So do not try to pre-build this during the build time, right? So this way we can get our build. Okay, now I'll say npm run start to start the server from the build folder. And now if I just go and access the localhost 3000, you'll see that we are getting nothing. And if I just open the console, it looks like we are getting a bunch of errors. And the reason we are getting all of these errors, because like I've said, when we are using global error.tsx file, we need to include the full HTML over here. So that means I need to do entire HTML like this, right? So let's try to make the build again. Okay, npm run build. Now npm run start, refresh the page, and now you can see something went wrong coming from global error.tsx file. An error occurred in the server component render. The specific message is omitted in production build to avoid leaking sensitive details. A digest property is included on this error instance, which may provide additional details about the nature of the error. And obviously with the console, you can see the details about that error, right? So this was about global error.tsx file. Then let's talk about this not found file. So this is also a special file which can be used to basically modify the 404 page. For example, if you want to customize your 404 page, this can be used, right? So for example, if I just show you, so right now, if I just start the development server, and let me just get rid of all of this global error file and layout, we just clear out that error. We just go to localhost 3000, and this is the application, right? Okay. So I've essentially cleared all of the stuff so that we can understand a not found file. So right now when I try to open any page like that does not exist, it takes me to a 404 page, right? So let's say inside of at the root level, I can create a not found.tsx, and then this could contain the UI for that not found page. So that means anytime a user will try to open a URL that does not exist, we will load this UI, right? So this is how you can use not found to customize your 404 page. Okay. And then we have this route file. So in the next application, you can create your API endpoints. And the way you create your API endpoints is by creating an API folder inside of your app directory. And then inside of this API directory, you create folders like, let's say, I don't know, maybe get data. Inside of this get data, I can create a new file called route.ts. And then this file could have functions like whenever we are getting the get request, let's return a response called hello world. And notice the structure of the URL. So at the app directory, you will consider this the home. And then it's like you are saying that you have a structure like this: home, then API, then get data. Yeah, that get data. So that means whenever you make a request to this endpoint, you should get this response. So let's try that in the browser. Okay, I can come here and I can say API get data, and you can see this is the response that we are getting. So these are more like API endpoints, right? Okay. And finally, we have these two more files, which are template and default. I'm going to be talking about these files in the next video. See you soon.